How are things going with you?
Good.
So, where have I found you on this Tuesday?
So I'm in my office on campus, which is in the Fine Arts Building.
You're the director of the Sound Studies Institute and also the directors. I was going to bring this up of the Audio Games Lab. Now, does that sound like a fun gig? How would you describe what you do exactly?
I guess first and foremost, I'm a composer and a sound artist, and I teach those things here in the music department. So SSI is an example, Sound Studies Institute is an example of the units at the university that's sort of dedicated to research. And so I began directing it, I guess, a few years ago now. And really, what we do is part of it is sort of uplifting the work that happens on campus, the research that happens on campus in sound, regardless of the disciplines. The Audio Games Lab is more connected to my personal research and interest right now, which has to do with looking at various ways that video games afford us new ways of thinking about compositional form. I could go on and on about that because it's something I'm really passionate about, but I'll just
Hmm.
give you one example. I grew up really appreciating the value of records, of LPs.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say that the culture of listening to entire albums has sort of gone down further and further and further as the internet has
Ultimately
established
disappeared. Yeah.
streaming.
Yeah.
And so for composers and sound artists, that means that we sort of lose a lot of audience when it comes to sort of long form composition. But video games is, in addition to being a extremely mature art form at this point,
Hmm.
with lots of great examples of music and use of music, but it's also a place where people spend time. And so it occurred to me years ago that, wow, this is a really interesting place to work because all of a sudden I get a chance to work with long forms again, in the recorded realm and even make those experiences interactive. Well, that's really interesting. So I have a team of folks who are working on a variety of experimental game compositions, if you will.
Well, that's fascinating, and I think how insightful of you to actually find a spot where younger people, in particular, will sit still. And I know that this is really relevant, and I have a visceral example in that my son, of course, hums the theme to Last of Us all the time because he's been sitting at the game console, right? And he knows it, and he's musically inclined as well. Let's drill down on Hear Thyself, audio and music for Know Thyself as a virtual reality. When you talk about a multidisciplinary approach, this sounds like it hits the nail on the head. Although that's a lot of words to chew on. Can you distill it for us about what this looks and feels like?
Yeah, sure. I can kind of unpack that. The title's a mouthful.
It is.
So yeah, the project as a whole is called Know Thyself, which was developed by visual artist Marilyn Oliver,
Yeah.
who teaches printmaking and interactive media in the art design. She's an amazing visual artist who I've had the pleasure to be able to collaborate with over the last few years. And she has a real interest in the idea of our data, our personal data, not only in terms of the things we share on social media and the things that get shared without our consent, there and elsewhere, but also in the medical realm. She became really fascinated, when she had a full body MRI done, and just the ways in which she could just see everything, and
Hmm.
and so part of her interest in establishing Know Thyself was to both herself as an artist and also, making an opportunity for other artists to be able to sort of contemplate these issues, the issues around just the sheer amount of data about us that is out there, sometimes without us even knowing it. What would it be like to, give somebody an opportunity to see and read and manipulate and actually just like really get inside of someone's body, for example? So the two of the pieces that she's developed as part of the Know Thyself project
Yeah.
are called Your Data Body and My Data Body.
Okay.
And the My Data Body is all about her data, and it's really centered around that MRI experience. You see a body floating in space. And then Your Data Body is another piece where instead of it being her, she invited friends, family, and also strangers to submit data. And then we created a series of scenes where you can experience that data. There are also just really great opportunities to experience a virtual world with compelling images and sound if you haven't done that before. It was my entry level into working in virtual reality, and it's just been super interesting. So as a composer, I say composers because there were multiple people involved.
Right.
But yeah, we took the approach of scoring and doing sound design for these virtual worlds. And one thing I want to say that's a little bit of a when we say hear thyself, doesn't necessarily mean that we got in and like recorded the insides of our bodies
Yeah.
necessarily. Although there are some recordings of like that, but we focused on definitely the use of the voice, Marilyn's voice reading out her data and whispering it, and we also there's also some poetic text that's both spoken and sung in some of the works that's sort of related to data, personal data, and then lots and lots of sounds that come from significant objects or places from the folks whose data we're kind of experiencing. So that's I know that's a lot of stuff there, but that's kind of the general description of the project.
So when you walk into the room, at the Sound Studies Institute, that's where this is being presented. You put on the glasses. Is that the way you experience it? From a visceral point of view, is that the way it's experienced?
At the talk, it'll just be us giving a talk about it. So there'll be a projector and we'll be showing videos. But
Okay.
then we will have the piece set up in a couple of rooms. And yes, the piece is basically you put on a like a virtual reality headset, and that's what we'll be using to show the pieces.
It happened last year, and you had 7 examples of this, and people could walk in. Did you ever overhear anybody talking about it? What was their experience walking out?
I think people are often extremely surprised at how transportative the experience of putting on a VR experience is, where suddenly you're just completely surrounded by image and sound. And so I think a lot of people just enjoyed the process of being kind of quote unquote lost in the virtual reality scene that
Yeah.
we set up. But I think generally people were really compelled by just the nature of the space, and also responded really positively to the sound and the music in the two pieces that we worked on.
And it's open to the public, right?
The talk is open to the public, and I
Great.
think we'll be streaming it on YouTube as well. That you
Okay.
can go to soundstudies.ca to get info about that.
Well, let's talk about music for a second, and I'll have you make a request because CKUA has a huge library. Is there something you'd like to hear to go out of our interview?
Do you have anything by Sampa the Great?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think what I would enjoy hearing is OMG by Sampa the Great.
That's
Yeah.
excellent.
All right. Well,
Okay.
thanks a lot for this.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Scott.